My name's Liam Finn, and I'm a producer, line producer. I started in the studio system. I was the assistant to the head of physical production for Warner Brothers Studios. Did that for many years, learned the craft, went out into the world with studio producers as their assistant to kind of help them do this slate of movies that they had put in front of them, and then kind of realized I didn't really care for the politics that went on in the Hollywood system. So I decided that I would leave that world and go into the independent world. And there I joined Filmmakers Alliance. And there I was the vice president, overseeing physical production, trying to help filmmakers that were creative but didn't quite understand the logistics to kind of put a film together. So I did that for many, many years. And then after that, just started freelance producing all different kinds of media. So I've done everything except for TV, because TV is heavily unionized and heavily regulated. I was curious about verticals. This is a couple of years ago, before it kind of became a little more known. It was a very niche kind of proposition at the time. And I kind of knew it would just still be low budget filmmaking, but I wanted to kind of, play in that world, just because each format has its own parameters that teach you what's important in the messaging of whatever you're doing. And so I wanted to kind of wrap my head around understanding why verticals, if you simply change the, dimensions of how you're shooting, how that would affect production, because that's mostly what I do. So a producer like myself becomes a white label for them. I'm a production company for hire. So I'm doing work for hire, which means they're going to pay, they give me a script and then they give me a budget. Like, I'm not telling them how much it is. They're telling me how much they want to spend on it. Then I have to back into that number. So I am the decision maker of it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 days. It's based on the content of the script, right? The problem is I don't think that the companies necessarily have enough. Maybe they have more information now, but they weren't thinking in what traditional low budget filmmaking thinks is, which is we limit the number of locations, we limit the number of people. And the idea is that we would get more quality out of that if we didn't move around, and more quality if we didn't have to block and coordinate a lot of people. And that's the other thing. It's like the vertical format changes the blocking completely. It's helpful in the sense of locations. So like, they handed me a script, and the script was like, inside a hotel. It's like, well, on these budgets, you can't afford a hotel. Like, it is impossible. But if you found a very, big McMansion house that just had a staircase that was grand enough with marble, now all of a sudden you're in a vertical format. And it's like, I can shoot it and it feels like it's the lobby, although we never see the lobby. We then stage everything in front of there, and that's the kind of thing you're looking for, these cheats that help you, as in low budget filmmaking, as always, you're looking for multiple sets within one environment, because you don't want to move. Once you move, you lose time. Once you lose time, you're not filming. Yeah. The reason why they want to hire a third party production company is because the third party production company takes on all the liability. So, they may hand you a budget, but that budget then means I've got to find the insurance. I got to make sure I'm abiding by all the rules and regulations of, state and federal law, to make sure that I'm not putting anybody in jeopardy, and also to pay them, accordingly. And that's the disconnect, in the sense of, like, most people think that, that large, distributor is the, maker of it. They're not. They hire a company and pay them a flat fee. And then if you go over a budget, it's coming out of the fee that you've already baked in. So that's the reason why you see them like shot in like 7 to 10 days, because then there's a post process. Post process is like several weeks, if not months. And you now, as the production company, have to oversee the post production and manage it, but you are not responsible for the edit, meaning you have the company that hired you overseeing the quality of the edit. When I mean the quality of the edit, meaning they're basically telling you, this works, this doesn't work, go back and rechange it. And that can stretch on longer than maybe you've anticipated that it should in the post process. Because the other thing about this genre is that, because the format is being seen, basically on your mobile phone, the finishing is not high end, meaning everything can come out of a computer. Like the sound mixing can come out of a computer, the music can come out of a computer, the color, correction can come out of a computer. You're not going to facilities to kind of, amp it up. But it doesn't mean that they don't have, quality control. They will run it just like every other, company before distribution to make sure there's no anomalies or something's, wrong with it, and then you have to keep going back and fix it. And that's all on your dime out of the money they gave you. So really the budget they gave you, you always have to remember at least a third is going to be spent in post. At the beginning of any new format, the quality can be less than what we think of as cinematic because it's not about the end result as much as it is about the figuring out how the format will actually land in the end. Meaning, we just know that we're given a script and we have to put it into this format and we're going to use the same system that we used over here, but we can't quite fit the same 10 pounds into the 5-pound bag. And we're going to have to cut corners to get there. And when we cut those corners, the end result might be a little, less than in its quality, but because the end result is to have something, complete as opposed to something perfect, it's acceptable. Now, the genre is changing, meaning that over time, the tools are getting much more sophisticated. The filmmakers are getting much more sophisticated in the language that's kind of this version of cinema. And so there's not a lot of fishing around and hunting around and just saying, good enough, Yeah. Now it's like people have experience, and when you don't have experience, you don't know what to expect. When you have experience, you can pre-think and know what the problem's going to be and how to circumvent them. What they've realized is that AI and any sort of visual effect can really get them out of the jam of peopling the world, right? So movies, TV, they pay for real people to be in the environment, to walk around and make it feel like the world is inhabited by more than just your characters. In the vertical format, you are so narrow in your focus. You can get mostly two people in. If you're having an intimate conversation, you can fit more people in that. But if you have two people in the frame, you don't need to see all the background all at the same time. And so here now, what you're trying to do is, if you put your story in an environment that requires lots of people, AI or visual effects is the answer. So like, I've had a friend of mine did a hockey movie, right? The first one they did was without AI, in which they had to make up a part of the story. Like, we're always on the, when the place is closed down, or we're always at practice when it's just the team, that kind of thing. But then they had to, on the next one, because that one was very popular, they had to feel like, okay, you're telling us this is a big franchise hockey team. So now we have to feel it and see it. And what they would do is they would shoot in an empty ice rink on off hours, and then they would blanket it with, a fake audience in the background. And by virtue of the resolution of the screen, you would never know. There's multiple ways that they monetize these things. The first one is they use a coin base, which is, they'll give you 6 to 10 episodes for free. The idea is to hook you into the storyline, and then you get these micro payments of only, cents or dollars in order to kind of continue on to buy money. And then you can watch the whole thing if you want. That's converting into subscription. But, we think of subscription in my generation as an annual plan. But that's not true. They have week, month, and, 6 months year plan, so that, you could watch all their content all you want, but you're always going to be interrupted. Now, the interruption, if you watch it from start to finish, is very brief, and there's certain rules, like, you cannot have black frames. There's no like fade to black and everybody feel the black, whatever that beat is, and then go, like, you would lose the audience at that point. It's an opportunity. Let me just be clear. Like, it is an opportunity. It's like when I first started, it was Corman. Like, Corman made janky, genre movies. And if you got into that wheelhouse, you could work your way up. Here, it's the same thing. It's just you have to be more of your own entrepreneurial spirit to make things happen, you know? And I'm sure a lot of people are saying to themselves, hey, I'm going to make my own vertical, then I'm going to sell it, right? But it doesn't quite work that way because for those companies, what they do is they have an algorithm that has told them from all the viewing habits that they saw what works and what doesn't work. So you might think like, like you watch TV and you're like, oh, I could write that, right? Like who doesn't think that from time to time? And so you do that, but you're mimicking kind of this, lesser than thing to begin with. And it feels like it's just good enough in the context of a soap opera, let's say, because that's what these things right now are. Um, if I have 8 slaps and somebody gets cake in the face and, that's enough. But in the algorithm, what they find is the habits are something specific. Now, they're never going to tell you what's in the soup. They're going to, just kind of make you kind of do it in the edit or in the script. But, that's why it would be hard to kind of be a white label company that just makes them, let's say, on your own dime and then try to sell them. Because there's no return on investment. Like they will own it wholesale. And if they were, the best deals you're going to get is like a distributor, no minimum guarantee, no money up front, right? Meaning, okay, so I've spent my money, I've handed it over, and now I've got a 2-year return on investment that I've got to find out, if it does well. And, ultimately the problem is who's counting. I don't buy the idea that only cinema works in the horizontal frame. I mean, why is it square? It's square because photography was square at the beginning. Why isn't it round? I mean, there's no real reason other than we're using the legacy of the format that came before us and we're using that, So I just think that people are so accustomed to the other cinematic version that it's hard for them to see the future, because you're always using the past framework. It's like when television first started, it was literally just radio being filmed on, a TV. And then over time, the language of TV is even different than the language of cinema. It's similar, but yet TV has certain, because of the timeline, they would have ad breaks and you'd have to kind of build up to the ad break and then you'd go. And so, I've been tasked with taking things that were shot for TV and converting them into vertical videos. And it's problematic. And the reason why it's problematic is, yes, you can soup up, a percentage of it to me, meaning you can TikTok it, you can kind of make it feel a little more like it's of the, what the modern flavor is of social media, by adding graphics or, sound effects or snap zooms or realigning your, your framing if you want. But in the end, what you can't do is you cannot change the story beats. So for example, like if you have a 5-minute scene and that 5-minute scene has a character starting at one want and desire, and by the end, either getting it or not getting it. There's a whole bunch of beats that go on between here. And you need the 5 minutes to leave the audience with that final beat because they're going to take that beat away as the reason why that was there and carry it through to the story's end. But in the vertical format, because the algorithm tells them that most people only pay attention for a minute or two, they then have to truncate everything into either a minute or 2 minutes. They tend not to go over 2 minutes. And what happens is that now you have to find a different beat, right? And that beat might be worthy, but it may not be worthy enough to gain your interest to continue on, because they're breaking it. Normally, don't break people's attention. Keep them going by the content that you're in. But in this environment, it doesn't work that way. It's episodic, and it's a good 60 to 90 episodes for each one. It's absolutely here to stay. What you have to think about is first off, the world economy. Okay, so let's start with that. It's like most people, like my generation, went to the theater, right? we would go and hear about a movie, see about a movie. Somebody would tell us about it. We go. Now the movies that are out in theaters are events. Like they have huge marketing budgets. That's how you learn of them. If you're into the superhero genre, you go. If you're into the, werewolf, vampire, you know. Um, but there's a whole swath of stories that will never meet that marketing money spend that you have to do in order to get that into that world. So that is a different tier and class of film and entertainment. Then you just have to keep working down, right? And where you get to eventually is, it's like I remember when YouTube first came around, right? YouTube came around, and we were told, all filmmakers were told, all you need is a URL. So Warner Brothers, Liam Finn, equal. Yes, equal. Problem is, everybody knows about Warner Brothers. Nobody knows about Liam Finn, right? So now I got to be a marketer and I got to get everybody to Liam Finn. So that's challenge one. And then the second was, at that time, like video wasn't as present as it is now. So a monumental task to get video onto the internet. That was a cost that we couldn't afford. All of that has kind of, now gone down. But here's what came out of that. Mr. Beast, in a completely new genre, which was host focused, not filmmaker focused. And those people are making more money than filmmakers are, even though the filmmakers were coming out of a tradition that was paying people a lot of money. So you have to look at vertical video as either one, a stepping stone for somebody that's going to make their name in this genre as an opportunity, and then jump to another format that's going to, be their, step up. But that happens to very few people. And then the other is, there's a reason why DJI, that company that makes drones, is more successful than Panavision. And the reason why is there's a big marketplace for people using DJI products than there is Panavision. And you have to think of the same thing when it comes to media. It's like there is so much media now and so much of available conveniently for you that why would you take the effort to take the next step to have to go and find and or go to your media when it could come to you? The difference now is that they've figured out that cliffhangers are the way to hook people. Much like, TikTok figured out scrolling is the way to keep people engaged. So right now you can see, you would go from drama to like mystery format, like another genre that people know, police drama. Like you can see certain things dovetailing very easily into the 1 to 2 minute formula. Who is the killer? Dun, dun, dun. Oh, I want to know who the killer is. That kind of thing. But eventually what will happen is it will become so ubiquitous that people will accept the genres that we think are cinematic on a big screen in their hand, if you're a good storyteller. But you have to think of it like this, that you have to think of it as it'll be individual curated channels. So what will happen is that everybody's going to get into it. They're all going to try it. You'll have tiny little ones and big ones and medium ones and whatnot. And then the only thing that will distinguish anybody is the trust that is built from the name brand. So like if I say to you A24, you suddenly think of these kind of indie movies with a strange perspective of the world. And that's like, you trust that brand, There's another place called Angel Studios, which is heavily Christian based in its storytelling. It's not always Christian focused, but it has Christian values behind it. And what they do is they have a network around the world of, I don't know, like a little over 1 million people, and they use them as the test audience. So they get a script, they share the script, and they say, what do you think? They're like, oh, there's not enough this, there's too much of that, da, da, da. It comes back to them. Then they go to the filmmaker, like change this, change that, and then filmmaker. And then they go out and they shoot the movie, and then they show the movie to a different set. What do you think? Well, it doesn't have a, and then they come back and it's like, okay, replace this or move this or so, So they're doing what studios do, but they already know who their audience is. And then once the movie comes out, what happens? These two groups of people, hey, I was involved with helping them make that movie. You should go see that movie. They themselves will look at the movie, and now suddenly that network blossoms and they can talk to them directly, and then it expands onto the rest of the world.